I'll kind of repeat what I said earlier. If you can leave yourself on mute and maybe turn your cameras off as well and leave your cameras off as well, just to save bandwidth. We're going to have probably, looks like we have about 30 people in here right now. So sometimes it gets a little laggy if we do have more than a few cameras on. We'll get started here in probably 1 minute. Okay, it looks like we have everybody loaded and we are recording, so that is good. I will do a quick introduction and then we will get started. So welcome everybody, thank you for coming. My name is Chris Drosch. I am one of the co-chairs of the KFNA Redevelopment Committee. We are the ones that host these development meetings and kind of in partnership with the developing partner who is coming in to the neighborhood to work on a project. So we're here specifically to talk about the proposed project at 4207 Nicollet, also known as kind of more generally known as the Curran's property on the corner of 42nd and Nicollet, right across from the park. So I'll give everyone a little bit introduction to redevelopment. Sorry for those who have been in these meetings before that have heard me go over this, but redevelopment is a committee of KFNA, the Kingfield Neighborhood Association. We are the group that looks at all things, I almost want to say change in the neighborhood, physical change in the neighborhood. So whether that's building developments, historically has looked a lot at streets and communicating different changes and advising on different things that happen in the neighborhood. So we have a group of neighbors, volunteer neighbors who come together and help advise on these projects, think about both in the short term, looking at specific projects, and in the long term, thinking about how our neighborhood grows and changes in the ways that us as neighbors can have influence and shape over that. So a project like this is a perfect example of a project, kind of an acute thing that is happening in the neighborhood that we are working on and are addressing and looking at and advising on. And so we are very excited that you're here. If you are interested in things like I just talked about in redevelopment, in looking at the long kind of term development of our neighborhood, how things change and shaping that, we would love to have you on the committee. All that really takes to be on the committee is essentially sending us an email and saying, I would like to be included in future communications into that committee. I believe Sarah has posted a welcome post, and I'm sure she will post her email address here shortly. Into the chat. I'll go over a little bit of the kind of mechanics of Zoom, just if this is the first time people have been in here. On the bottom, you will see kind of a bar. It says participants, chat, share screen, record, or maybe you won't see record, but the key here is chat. One of the things we are going to do is ask you, we've asked for questions beforehand. I have all of those. Alex and Evan and their team have those questions as well and are going to work through their presentation to answer those questions. If you have additional questions during the presentation or questions that you feel like maybe got missed or you would like further clarification on, please add those into the chat. If you're in the chat right now, make sure that it says to everyone, and I will be able to see those messages. I would encourage everybody to keep that chat as clean as possible in terms of questions. If it starts becoming a conversation, it is much more difficult for me to pull out questions. But if somebody is asking a question and you would like to contribute in the chat a very simple answer or a link to something, that is totally fine. But if we could just try to keep those conversations down. I will be asking questions based on the question list that came in and that chat after. So please leave yourselves on mute and the cameras and your cameras off. So again, I'll just say thank you to everyone for joining. Everyone should also know that this meeting is being recorded right now, and it will be recorded for the duration of the meeting and will be posted on our Kingfield Neighborhood Association YouTube page if you wanted to direct others who maybe weren't able to make this meeting to that link. This is not the only opportunity to engage on this project. There will be further opportunities as this project gets worked through both kind of engagement with us as neighbors and as the city. So if you have additional questions, if you have detailed questions, or some of the questions that came in previously were kind of more general questions or things about KFNA, KFNA's role in projects like these, we will work to answer those, but they might not be answered tonight. So again, feel free to reach out to Sarah. I will also put my email address in the chat as well. Feel free to reach out to me if you have some of those additional questions. So with that said, I think I will turn this over to Alex and Dennis to do a introduction on the project and talk a little bit about maybe some of the background and where they're at. And then I think we will jump into a more detailed presentation after that, looking at the design and what's going on. So take it away. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Chris. Really appreciate that introduction and appreciate the opportunity to be here. My name is Alex Giese. Sitting here with Dennis Curran, owner of Curran's, the restaurant, and also property owner that we're here to talk about. And I do want to just, express that, again, thank you for having us. This is a very important part of the process for us, being engaged with the neighborhood and speaking with the neighborhood and getting feedback from the neighbors, and then looking at all that and incorporating that feedback into our project. So this is an essential element of the process for us, and we're happy to be here and looking forward to the engagement. A little bit about myself is I'm a local real estate professional that's also a business owner. I've been involved in Kingfield for almost 10 years now, so I'm very much invested, not just financially, but physically, emotionally, mentally in the neighborhood. I love it. It's a big part of my life and who I am. Specifically, I've been involved in the redevelopment of the corner at 38th and Nicollet. So I'm a co-owner of that building, as well as a partner in 5 Watt Coffee and Nighthawks, and proud of what we've done there in terms of creating jobs and just creating vitality, and just kind of helping to improve and uplift the neighborhood. So, it's been great being a part of Kingfield, and I'm really looking forward to this project and just becoming more and more entrenched and engaged in a neighborhood that I love and that I know all of you are very invested in as well and love, and it's a big part of who you are. Speaking of people who are entrenched in the neighborhood and who are have been a big part of it for literally decades, Dennis Curran has joined me here, and I just want to give Dennis a few minutes to make some comments and kind of talk about his, how our relationship has kind of evolved and how the process has gone with us and what his plans are and all that, because I know there are a lot of people in the neighborhood that are curious about that, and I just think it's great that Dennis agreed to be here and is willing to chime in and talk a little bit. So I'll hand it over to Dennis for a few minutes, and then we'll jump back into kind of more project specifics, if that's all right. All right, can everyone hear us? Looks like Chris's screen is frozen.
Oh, I'm still here. Yeah, here you guys are good. Yep, we can hear you.
Okay.
Hear you fine. Yep.
All right, I'll hand it to Dennis here for.
Started out with, we've been in business for 72 years. My mother and father bought that lot. It was a vacant lot, and they built a drive-in on it. We've evolved throughout the years, and I went into business with my father in 1977, and I've been running the restaurant ever since. And over the last 15 years, different people have approached me to buy the business. And I, at the time, didn't feel like I was ready to sell. Alex approached me, at the beginning of the year, And I took it into some consideration, but it wasn't really serious until the pandemic hit. And with that, we had our takeout. We started out with just doing 10% of our sales, and it grew to 20%. And once the patio opened and the restaurant dining opened on June 5th, they allowed us June 9th. And our business came back at 60%. So, you know, at that time, prior to that, I decided it's probably time for me to get out of the business. We were during the recession in 07, our business got hurt terribly, and I had to reinvest hundreds of thousands of dollars into the business. And it took me 12 years to get all that paid off and to start over again. And now the pandemic hit, and I'm 86 years old, and I just don't want to do it anymore. I am tired, I am worn out. So I gave them my blessing. It's been a thrill to work with Alex. He's a very honest person, very upright person, very community orientated. I think his plan is very good. You know, many days I thought of what would go into that lot. You know, before they even approached me, I thought an apartment building would be perfect. You know, it overlooks the park, it's on the bus line, and it's quiet. So I always thought an apartment building would be great. I hope I covered everything. Like I said, you know, when this pandemic hit, we're at 60% now, and this thing's not going away soon. And we just, when winter comes, we're not able to seat in the restaurant. They have to be 6 feet apart. I estimated that I'd lose between $500,000 and $600,000 in the first year. I just can't do it anymore. You know, and it was a very hard decision for me because I've been working there and I know 3 and 4 generations of people. So I'm not taking the money in the running. You know, we've been heavily invested in the neighborhood. We contribute as much as we can to the community events and different functions. But I don't want to ramble on, so I'll let you take over. If anyone has any questions, they can ask me because I got to get back to work. I'll be more than happy to answer.
Yeah, Chris, if there are specific questions that on your list that were kind of more directed towards Dennis, maybe we could kind of part with the typical structure here, and
Sure.
he does have to get going, so he'd be happy to answer some questions, but now is the time.
I think that was a big, I think that covered, I think people were just kind of generally, from what I had seen in the questions, just wondering kind of a little bit about the backstory and how the kind of the relationship came into play. But yeah, I think that covers most of it, and I don't see any specific questions in the chat right now. Maybe if people did want to ask a question in the chat right now, if there's anything for Dennis, but I'm sure, you know, we can get Sarah. Sarah on our staff can coordinate with Dennis too, if there are any questions that people have. So I think probably we're okay for right now. Thank you, Dennis, for kind of the years of service to the neighborhood. I know that from everything I've seen and in my experience of Curran's, it's been a kind of a neighborhood institution. And so everybody, I think from myself, from the board, speaking for the board and speaking just generally from the neighborhood, thank you. And we are indebted to your service to this neighborhood and serving everyone in this neighborhood. And I think we'll probably have some questions from the board on how we maybe recognize that on the KFNA board level, but we'll be in touch with that. We'll be in touch with you about that as well too. So I think
one more thing.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Yeah, I've been reading a lot on the internet. I haven't responded to any of it, but some people say that, and they didn't name Alex by name, that I was heavy-handed and I was forced into this thing by him, and that is the furthest thing from the truth. You know, I found Alex to be a straight-up guy. So nobody's forcing me.
Thank you, and we'll thank you for that, and we'll pass on any questions. But yeah, I think thank you again, and maybe we can keep running along. So thanks, Dennis.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dennis. All right, thank you, Chris. I'll just kind of jump back in to the proposal, and then from there I'll pass it along to Evan and the architectural team to kind of get into more specifics about the project. But what I'm proposing for the site is very much geared towards the 2040 comp plan guidance for this corridor, which is considered corridor 6 in the 2040 build plan guidance. And so what we've proposed here is a 5-story apartment building with approximately 82 units and underground parking, which currently we have 36 parking stalls. The building does step down to 4 stories on the south side to more mirror that apartment condition on the south, and then steps back up to 5 as we kind of climb over towards the park side. And again, Evan will do a great job of kind of talking more about the mass of the property and how the design is very much a function of looking at of course city guidance, but then also the neighborhood itself, and trying to gear something that fits into the context of what's already going on there architecturally. The building itself will be a mix of market rate units and affordable units. As some people may be aware, the city has recently adopted an inclusionary zoning policy, which I very much support as a developer. There are several different options within the IZ policy and we're looking at all of the different options, but there will be affordable units in the building. So I wanted to make that clear, because that's something that I know people have been asking about. But with that, we are exploring different voucher programs to create additional layers or opportunities for affordability for folks. So the goal of this project, and I've kind of communicated this to the entire team, the architectural team, the construction team, which we have lined up, which is a local firm called LS Black Constructors. The goal here is to create a very nice product, but one that we can build efficiently so that we can keep the cost in line and pass that along to our renters in the form of what I would term as accessible rents. There are different definitions of affordable, right? And we will meet many of those definitions in various ways, but the overarching goal here is for every unit to be as accessible as possible to as many as possible financially. So that is a primary goal of this project. We'll have we haven't 100% programmed what the rents will be. The building will likely start construction next spring and be completed early spring or late spring, early summer of 2022. So it's a little bit of a moving target in terms of, you know, what housing is going to look like 2 years from now. But, you know, I would anticipate studio units renting anywhere in the $900 to $1,000 range with 1 bedrooms in the anywhere from, you know, $1,300 to $1,400 range. And then we will have the building itself is predominantly studio and 1 bedroom units. We will have about 10 2-bedroom units and 5 3-bedroom units as well. And because we do want to have a mix of units in the building that can accommodate roommate situations or families. And so it's important to have that unit mix all the way from studios to 3 bedrooms. What else? Just a little bit, I want to touch on the schedule because, again, just as I mentioned at the beginning of this meeting, this part of the process is very important to us. And so we are going to look for feedback. We've been taking it. We presented to the Committee of the Whole in the City of Minneapolis last week, and are now presenting to you. And we will take feedback and look to incorporate what we can into the project, and then submit formally for our land use application sometime in August. And from there, it would go to Planning Commission in September, late September or early October, depending on when we submit. So there are several weeks, a couple months even before this thing is officially in front of the city. And so during that time, we intend to continue to evolve and work on the building. With that, I'd like to hand it over to Evan Jacobson of Tushy Montgomery Architects to speak more about the building itself and kind of talk through the massing and the materials and some of the landscaping and things like that I know people have questions about. So I'll hand it to Evan.
Thanks, Alex. Can everybody hear me okay? Great. First off, my name is Evan Jacobson. I am a principal and an architect with Tushy Montgomery Architects. On the line with me is Chris Gorder, who's an associate of mine working on the project on a day-to-day basis. He's down there on the bottom of the screen if you're looking. I will start with a very brief 5-page, 6-page presentation that is basically the same presentation that we gave to the Committee of the Whole last week. As Alex mentioned, we are still, relatively early in the design process. We are soliciting feedback from the city, from Councilmember Jenkins, from the Kingfield Neighborhood Association Development Board, Redevelopment Committee, and now obviously in kind of a public format, looking for feedback and input from the neighbors themselves. So we consider this a very important part of the process, and are looking forward to showing you the building and answering any questions that we can. After I give this presentation, I'll stick around and answer any specific questions that anybody on the line has that can be put in that text box, and then Chris can kind of moderate that and read those questions if I didn't address them in my proposals sufficiently. With that, before I start on the presentation, as an architect, obviously our goal is to create the best project, the best product, the best architecturally building that satisfies a number of different criteria. And the criteria are requirements from the owner, requirements from the city, requirements from the neighbor, and what's appropriate in terms of scale and massing, streetscape. And at the end of the day, we hope that we create something that is beneficial for the neighborhood, for the built environment, for the residents, and for the community. So obviously we are kind of tasked with receiving a lot of feedback from a lot of different parties interpreting a lot of codes and ordinances, and then trying to create a product that basically synthesizes the best result and the best outcome for everybody. So we don't certainly always get it right, but that's part of this process is we're here looking for feedback of how we can make it better. So with that, I will share my screen here, and just so everybody knows, my screen is over here, my camera is over here, so I will be kind of not looking directly into the camera here. Okay, can everybody see my screen? It should say 4207 Nicollet Avenue.
I think it's loading right now. Whoop. Yep, we are good. At least it's good on my end.
Okay, thanks, Chris.
Yep.
So I think everybody is intimately familiar with the site, the Curran's restaurant site. And I think this rendering has been circulated a couple times on the paper and some neighborhood boards and that sort of thing. And obviously we did send out that neighborhood mailer kind of describing some of our approach to the project, the massing, the materiality. In general, it's a 5-story building. It steps down to 4 adjacent to the 2.5-story multifamily buildings to the south. And then the materials kind of, what we believe playfully reinforce that kind of step up to the corner to address a very prominent, facade that does overlook that park, has north-facing views, will have downtown skyline views, and really, we want as many residents in this building as possible to have that nice view looking downtown, looking over that park. Just to explain to everybody a little bit about the programming of the building. The site, excuse me, it slopes pretty dramatically from the corner of Nicollet and 42nd to the alley, about 10 or 11 feet. So it actually works out pretty well from just a organic design of an apartment building, with that single level of parking below grade access from the existing alley. All of our services, our trash, our cars, our bike parking, all of that will be contained within the garage. So it might actually clean up that alley a little bit compared to what's there today. So starting with this image on the left, basically everything in gold, that's the common space of the building, anchored really on this northwest corner with a club room that Alex might talk about a little bit more. He's thinking about some ideas of how to make that space community oriented, or it may be able to be leased out to community functions or community groups that may want to come in and lease that space for an afternoon or an evening to hold a meeting or some sort of, fundraising or get together sort of event. So really what we're doing here is, we're trying to keep the activity of the building on that high energy corner of 42nd and Nicollet. And actually what that does is it spills out into kind of a semi-private patio that kind of helps ease that transition from the public sidewalk into kind of more of that public-private club room. And then obviously there's some landscaping between that'll help soften that edge, define the space for the apartment residents and guests from the public sidewalk, but provide enough activity and energy on that street to contribute to the activity of Nicollet and what's happening in the surrounding neighborhood. So as you can see, the big blue arrow here, that's the primary entrance to the building. It's about 40 feet from the corner of the building. That's how you would get in. We do have a leasing office that we would imagine would be staffed, again, trying to have that staffed with the energy in the office. On the street, more activity and eyes on the street are something that we always are encouraged to do through the design process from municipalities and owners. People like to see that energy contribute to the street and not just have a blank wall. Continuing south, so we do have several units that will have walk-up units. These have been very popular, obviously, through the years with bike commuters who can have their bike out front of their apartment, people with pets or animals who want to jump out real quick and take the dog for a walk when they get home from work, or anybody who just wants to have that nice direct access, have a little patio set out there. So we feel pretty good about the walk-ups to the south of the main entrance on Nicollet, and we actually are extending that kind of back between the existing buildings a little bit to have some more walk-ups kind of off of this alley. One thing that's important to note on this, I'll draw maybe just a rectangle here. The existing Curran's restaurant building actually does come all the way up to the property line here. So I'll put that little white box there and just kind of highlight it real quick. That's basically the footprint of the existing restaurant. So as you can see, the building that we're proposing, the southern edge here is actually, about 13 feet north of that existing multifamily building to the south, compared to the restaurant that's basically on the property line right now. So, we consider that a good thing for the neighborhood and the neighbors, adding a little bit of green space between those buildings. And when we were looking at that, I think I'll show you in the next slide here. That was one of the first things we looked at, is obviously there's those four prominent kind of classical, 2.5-story brownstones that kind of have a very rhythmic spacing along Nicollet, about 30 feet in between each one of them. So what we did when we first started laying out this building was we identified that space between each of the buildings and actually matched that. So the distance between our building and the adjacent buildings to the south is equal. And you can kind of see it in this image down here on the bottom right. So what we were trying to do is really kind of mimic the existing front yard setback that those four buildings created and the spacing between them. And then you can also see this materiality dropping down to that 3-story level, pretty much timing out with the top of those buildings is really a gesture to try to make this sort of the building, step down, be more respectful to those neighbors. And then as it approaches Nicollet and 42nd, that's where the building steps up and makes kind of a grand gesture on that intersection. So again, just kind of zooming into this top streetscape elevation, you can kind of see the 2.5-story roof lines, some pitches and stuff. And then again, kind of all of the dark shaded area, that's the dark, the beige and the tan. We haven't really solidified what those actual materials are. It's really kind of more of a color study and a massing study right now. We'll certainly kind of continue to refine the materials and the color palette as we continue the design process going into our actual land use application. But what you can see is kind of the gold highlight that we put on the top of these roofs kind of, is replicated almost, most closely on the southern face of the building. And then it steps up, the mass of this roof line steps up to that 4-story. And then we kind of use that material again to step that up to 4 stories and then step that up to 5 stories as the primary mass of the building becomes 5. So, it's certainly one of those things where when Alex first approached us on the site, we look at the ordinances, the setbacks, all of the things that are required from the city, as well as the future guidance. And obviously right now we're in kind of a nebulous of this 2040 plan that was recently adopted. And really, the guidance for this site under the 2040 lens is a corridor 6 building, which does not require any commercial uses and, allows buildings up to 6 stories. So from the city's perspective, 6-story building is appropriate here. We did study that option with Alex right off the bat. It seemed a little tall, and that's kind of where we kind of developed this strategy of, chopping down a level, going to a 5-story building, and then actually, further stepping down the building on the southernmost side to make a gesture or a nod towards those existing buildings. The image on the lower left here, I didn't really talk about that much, but clearly this is kind of the primary corner from Nicollet and 42nd. You can see kind of the larger expansive glass right on the corner with a little bit of that patio behind it, playing with some ideas of potentially doing kind of a little knee wall, retaining wall, with some heavy vegetation in front of it, just to kind of create a little bit of a, public to private separation. You have a door kind of exiting from directly that patio, the patio to the club room inside. Primary entrance, you can see with the canopy extending out. And then as you move south on the building, those walk-up entrances, and trying to get some additional greenscape and landscape all around the building. I'll jump into the next slide here. So this is just a kind of a snapshot of what it looks like today and what we would envision it looking like at the completion of this building. So right now there's a very limited kind of green planting strip along the curb stop of the existing restaurant, with a little vegetation on the signage here. So One of the things you'll notice is we actually do have quite a bit more vegetation. The building is stepped back anywhere from, I think it's 25 feet over on the 4-story portion, typically ranging, some of these bump outs are in the 6 or 8 feet and coming back to 10 feet. So kind of undulating up and it steps back both in plan and in elevation as it moves to the south there. But again, our goal is to have a very robust landscape plan and really, develop a positive impact to the streetscape and the built environment and the pedestrian experience around, this neighborhood, Nicollet, and, adjacent to MLK Park, obviously. So these are the views looking on 42nd. So one of the things that we wanted to note here is, actually right now, Curran's has been there so long that this retaining wall is technically actually over the property line by about 10 feet, 10 or 11 feet, I believe. And so one of the things that our development actually proposes then is to give that 10 or 11 feet back to the right of way, effectively as it should be. And then again, have a very robust landscape plan along that north edge of the building. So, what you see today is basically, concrete, curb, concrete, concrete, concrete. That's going to go back to more of a traditional, trying to get a little bit of a grass boulevard between the concrete curb and the sidewalk. And then planting the edge, the perimeter of that building with a nice, 10 foot, 11 foot, pretty lush greenscape that should really improve this kind of pedestrian experience along 42nd. Again, just another kind of comparison on the vegetation and the green space on that corner of 42nd and Nicollet. I did have a chance just to pull a couple quick numbers before the meeting today, and right now. Again, Curran has been there so long, it's grandfathered in, and this site technically has about 50 square feet of impervious area. And our proposal with the added greenscape along 42nd is actually going to be around 2,000 square feet of pervious area. So it's about 40 times the amount of greenscape that's currently on the site today. And I think, there's just kind of one more image here, looking kind of down that alley. Again, you can see the southern edge of the building and the property and the parking lot, basically right on that property line, which if I drew a line in this elevation would be, probably right in here somewhere, kind of as it goes probably 2 or 3 feet east of this sidewalk. So in general, that's kind of what we wanted to cover, just in terms of a design and presentation. Hopefully that helps explain kind of some of the decisions that, were made during the design process. I can open it up to just a 3D view from our actual committee of the whole that just kind of has a larger overview of the project. So, with that, what did I miss? I missed that, we do have a little bit of a dog wash facility here on 42nd, so that as that site slopes down, the intent is to have some nice light fixtures and some active space again on the kind of the corner of the alley, kind of capping that nice landscaping that we're doing along 42nd. What else? Oh yeah, so in this isometric down here, you can see a roof deck. One of the things that we looked at in this project early on was programming a roof deck. Obviously, a lot of these new buildings have them. I can let Alex speak to this later, but I think the last time we discussed it, that's probably not going to be in the project. We consider it kind of an added expense. At this point, there's a lot of costs incurred with, taking the elevator up to the roof, actually putting those concrete pavers on there, putting the railing on there, then you got to plumb it and get some gas up there and some grills. At this point, one of the things that Alex has said time and time again is that, he wants to bring a project to this neighborhood that is a new construction product, but is as attainable to as many people as possible. And so he's been really on us to control our costs and control how we're designing the building in terms to, make a nice product, but also not go over the top. And that's, with the giant park just to the north of the site, we kind of question the validity or the merit of having that rooftop deck up there, incurring those expenses and then passing those along to any potential tenant through the form of increased rental rates for these apartments. So, I think that some of that logic is probably what has kept us at one level below grade in parking. I know there's been a couple comments regarding the 36 parking stalls for the 84 units or the 82 units, excuse me, that we're proposing. On that, the complexity there, just from a building construction standpoint, is this site is so well positioned for that one level of underground parking that going down another level is gonna, what it does is it really drives up the construction costs. We have to find space for a ramp, which we really kind of don't have. And then once we get down underground, you have to extend the elevators and the stairs and all that sort of stuff. And I know that we did explore that option with the contractors, but it's one of the things that, that was such a significant increase to the project cost that, unfortunately that kind of gets directly passed along to whatever resident would potentially live in this project, because, the project has to be built and financed per the metrics that exist today with the financing institutions and the banks and all of those requirements. I think another thing that would kind of, tip our hat into the direction of the parking is probably adequate for this project is just, we are on a major bus route. A lot of the tenets of the 2040 plan and the objectives of the Minneapolis City Council are to reduce our dependency on single family vehicles and private vehicles. And, I think that you can look at it a couple ways. You can say that if we build one-to-one parking, then we can assume that everybody who lives in this building will have a car, for that period of time. And if they don't, that parking spot doesn't get leased, and the costs then get pushed back into the apartment units, and people have to pay more rent. So, keeping it at one level below grade, I think, is helping us to deliver a more, attainable price point on the average unit. And it really kind of goes in line with some of the overall goals of the 2040 plan and the comprehensive plan as directed by the, Minneapolis City Council. And there's, fairly walkable neighborhood and public transportation. So it is a pretty good candidate for a site with, not a one-to-one parking as you might see in other locations in the suburbs or someplace else. And so with that, I don't know that I have a whole lot else to cover. Chris, maybe if you have any specific questions, I'd be happy to take those and direct them to Alex if I'm not able to cover.
Yeah, so maybe I'll jump in just so that everyone's clear. Can you clarify kind of the variances or the anticipated variances that you're looking at? And because I know we're in kind of this interesting time between current code and 2040 guidance. So can you talk a little bit about like what those variances are, what they apply to, and why, like how the current code compares to 2040, so people understand kind of what you're asking from a variance perspective? Absolutely.
So we are a C2 zoning, commercial 2 zoning here currently. That is guided for the corridor 6, and actually, the way that the zoning ordinances work before the 2040 plan is basically there is a zoning designation, and in the city code of ordinances, those zoning designations all have established criteria, and the established criteria is allowable height, allowable floor area ratio, allowable dwelling units per acre, parking requirements, just kind of spells out all those things. Today, as the City Council adopted the 2040 plan late last year, we actually don't have those metrics established yet. They actually, the city planning, Minneapolis City Planning, basically created a new division to basically spend a year or 2 years writing the new ordinances that support the 2040 guidance, right? So the 2040 guidance is Corridor 6, and you can go on the website and you can click on the site and it'll say, Corridor 6, built form up to 6 stories. And then they have a use provision, and you can do a mixed use building, you can do an all residential building, you can do something with an activated first floor or not activated first floor. And so basically, as it sits today, it's C2. C2 is designated for 4 stories up to 56 feet. But typically, the planning commission, the city council always basically give precedent to the guided zoning, which would be that 24 corridor 6, which doesn't necessarily have a height associated with it other than 6 stories. So the building right now, as it's measured via the city of Minneapolis, is 58 feet. So we would be looking for a variance of about 2 feet. Now that might actually change if we take off that roof deck, because right now the parapets are 4 or 5 feet tall, which provide the required guardrail height. So if we took off the rooftop deck, we might actually be able to drop those parapets down, which would mean that we wouldn't even need that variance for height, although we would be exceeding the stories. So current guidance is up to 56 feet. We're basically proposing a 56 to 58 feet building per the way that the city measures it. But we are proposing 5 stories instead of 4. So we would need that height variance because we technically are under that C2 guidance.
Okay. Thanks. Can you talk a little bit? Are you requesting a variance? Because I know then there's parking minimums, and can you talk a little bit about the parking variance as well?
Yeah. So again, there's no supporting guidance for corridor 6 parking guidance right now. We don't really know what that is, but under the C2, I think it's you basically get there's kind of a equation criteria, and what happens is, I think it's basically 1 parking space per unit, but then there's bonuses and kind of deductions that you can take. So technically, I think we are required to have 0.5 parking. So I think we would be requiring a variance for right now. We have 36, and we have 82, so we need 41. So I think we're technically 5 parking spaces short. We do have the bike parking that's required, bike parking in our garage, and then we're including some of that solid waste in the garage that eats up some of those parking spaces. So yes, we will be looking for a small variance for the parking request. If it came down to it, there may be an option for us to get up to that required 41 to eliminate that variance. But right now, I think that the benefit of using some of those spaces for those other functions, is kind of in line with how we're looking at the project. In terms of other variances, I think that our southern setback, the main building form, I can jump back to the site plan. I think when we went to the committee of the whole, Hillary, our planner, some of these decks, infringe on the setback. Our primary building is within the setback, or it meets the established setback criteria for C2. But I think that some of these walk-up decks to access these units are larger than the allowed area. There's an area limitation for a structure like a deck, and I think some of them are just a little bit bigger. So I think it's just obstructions or encroachment within the setback area for the decks and balconies. And then I think that this piece too, she is technically considering this piece an encroachment into our setback because it's actually what it is it's a mechanical louver and it goes down into the garage. So it's basically at grade. So you won't really even see it from grade. It's just like a louver that's flush with the grass, and we'd have landscaping around it. But technically it is a built structure within our setback, and that's how we get the exhaust air full of the carbon monoxide out of our garage. Chris Gorder, I think that basically covers the variances listed on Hillary's staff report. Can you think of any other off the top of your head?
No, I believe you covered everything. Yep.
Could you quickly?
Okay.
I think you covered this a lot, but there was just one specific question, and I think you covered this on some of the variances. But what the specific plan would be if maybe these variances don't go through or they don't get approved?
in terms of how we would redesign the building,
Yeah,
or
I think that's
you know, yeah, you know, I think that you know, we would certainly, you know, for whatever reason, the city planning commission didn't feel that there was enough benefit from this project to justify whatever variances we're asking for, which, you know, are relatively small. I mean, I think that just from my professional opinion as an architect, the height variance is kind of a moot point given the 2040 guidance. I don't think there's a whole lot of grounds for somebody to, or the city planning commission to reject a building on height that conforms with the guided zoning. So I don't necessarily know about that one. You know, I mean, if there was, you know, a problem with the encroachment of our walk-up patios between the buildings to the south, I mean, we could always just take those off. You know, those units don't have to be walk-up units. Those units could still be there. The mass of the building would basically be in the same spot because the mass conforms to the C2 setback, which, you know, just candidly, the 2040 plan and the corridor 6 zoning doesn't have setback requirements. So, you know, right now it's an equation. It's, you know, I think it's 4 plus 2x, x being the number of stories over 2 or something like that. And so that establishes basically a 13-foot setback from that southern property line. That sort of language or guidance doesn't exist in the 2040 corridor 6. So we're operating kind of under both lenses, right? We're trying to achieve and design a building in line with the guided zoning, which is the direction that CPC always judges us under. But we're kind of having to play within the existing C2 zoning. So, I mean, it's possible that in corridor 6 in the future, they might not have that same side yard setback. So yeah, I mean, I think that to answer your question more bluntly, Chris, you know, we could take off these balconies and eliminate that variance. We could eliminate or relocate the area well to a different side of the building. You know, we could probably actually, you know, have an intake over on this side and an exhaust over on this side and some transfer fans in the garage down here that would basically allow us to eliminate that encroachment setback. We don't have any encroachment setback or setbacks on the 42nd or the Nicollet beyond kind of this point here. And then really to get those extra parking spots, you know, there's probably some opportunity for us to, you know, take a look at the garage. You know, one of the things that we could do, we could always extend the footprint of the building over to the south to pick up more parking in the garage. Right now it's efficient because this wall here is directly in line with the wall above, which is the most efficient way to construct that. And sometimes, you know, what you can do is you can push this edge of the garage over and basically put a green roof on it so nobody really knows it's there. But that would help us pick up probably an additional 2 to 3 parking spots at least. And then if we looked at, you know, eliminating some bike racks, you know, we have bike racks in all the corners, or potentially redesigning our trash enclosure a little bit, we could probably pick up, you know, we could probably get to that 41 parking stalls. But again, I think that, you know, that all would effectively add cost to the building and it would take away bike parking. And we feel that it's important to have adequate bike parking for residents, especially if they don't have a car. And again, kind of trying to keep in line with, you know, Alex's direction to make this thing as efficient as possible to control those costs. Doing that would just, it would, you know, incur additional costs to the project, which, you know, ultimately would potentially has the potential to get passed through.
Okay. Oh, I guess while we're on kind of this, the garage plan, there's a question about kind of handling of trash and recycling and even organics. This is something that we've thought about as a neighborhood organization, and I know a lot of the apartment buildings struggle with is kind of like effectively handling recycling and even organics in their buildings, because it's not something that the city does for specific apartment building. So can you elaborate kind of on the system that you're thinking here, and maybe like elaborate that on that, and if there are ways to maybe make that as effective as possible to ensure that, I think the question is getting at, that the recycling, the trash, and maybe even organics could be facilitated in the building.
Absolutely, yeah. So in our garage level, I'll kind of flip to that alley view. So this is the alley view. We're trying to dress up this corner with that active dog wash function. This would be our primary vehicle entrance. And then we have kind of a man door for taking the bike out or whatnot. But then this garage door here is actually dedicated for trash. So all of our trash is contained and collected within the building. If I jump back to the presentation, you can see our trash room here. So each of these green circles is a trash chute. We would imagine one of those will be for recycling, one of those would be for trash. We used to do 3 chutes in the building, basically forever. I mean, I think from 2014 to 2017, every building we did had 3 chutes, one for recycling, one for trash, one for organics. And what we've found out over the years is that a lot of the building owners they're decommissioning the organics one, and they're just making it an additional trash or recycling chute. Because what happens is those blue bags, or the organic bags, are so thin because they're biodegradable that as they're going down the chute, they get hung up on something, and then you have somebody's, banana peel that gets caught in the trash chute, and it becomes a really problematic from an odor perspective. And so what, I lived in an apartment building that we designed downtown, and what that owner did is he decommissioned the organic chute. And then he provided every resident with one of those little blue organic things, and you just kept that under your sink. And then we had a communal, organics collection point in the garage, located probably in this trash room. It's just not an actual chute because of that odor issue. So, Alex, you could certainly speak to that on how you would intend to program this building, but that's, from my experience, how we've seen the trash, recycling, and organics handled in our most recent projects.
Nailed it, Evan. That's exactly how we will program it. We will have organics bins available for residents, and they just will likely not have chutes associated with it.
Okay, thanks. One quick question, I guess. Well, the discussion of kind of like ground floor commercial, ground floor retail in the building, I think especially as it relates to the corner of 42nd and Nicollet. And if I know we've talked a little bit about this in one of the initial reviews that we went through, but what the possibility for that would be. I think there's some kind of interest in having this be in the space that Curran's was, thinking about a lot of people walking to the park. So kind of what would be the possibility of that, and how maybe could something like that work?
Yeah. So again, as a small business owner and property owner in the neighborhood, I've seen and experienced firsthand, what it's like to own retail, and I know that there are a lot of, especially right now, it's a very difficult time. That's not going to last forever, and retail will come back. But part of the thought process here is there are dozens of storefronts up and down Nicollet that are struggling and that are becoming vacated, and I want to support those building owners by bringing residents to the neighborhood, and then also by not taking away the viability of their spaces. And I certainly don't want to program space within this building that is just going to sit vacant and empty and kind of have the opposite effect of what we're thinking of with the corner there, which is to activate the street. That being said, we met with the Kingfield Neighborhood Redevelopment Committee, had some great feedback there. As we discussed earlier, we had a meeting with Cal last week, and we are looking at options to program some level of retail into this space. It would, I think there are a lot of uses that would really be kind of unique, that we could program in here that wouldn't take up a ton of space, but that would really serve the community. We talked about kind of quick serve coffee, ice cream, ready to drink kind of station. So if you picture like almost like a hotel lobby area that was open, not just to the residents of the building, but to the neighborhood. Those are the kinds of things that we've started talking about as a development and architectural team, and we're very serious about that. At the very least, we are. I mean, you see all of kind of the common space here between the club room, the lobby, the leasing, the mail, and the fitness. And I think we have a lot of opportunity here to create spaces that are adaptable, and that can be even with some of the apartment units adjacent to those spaces that could potentially be adapted or kind of reimagined and reinvented over time as things change over time. So this is a kind of a fun but complex challenge that we are taking very seriously as we move towards land use application and planning commission.
Great. One of the questions, and maybe Alex, there's some kind of comments. If you could move closer to your mic at all, that would be awesome. I don't know if that's possible where you're sitting and stuff, but if you could, that would be awesome. One of the questions, I'm going to just read it specifically. Was the site/land already purchased/closed, or is it contingent on the city's approval?
So we have not closed on the property yet, and the purchase agreement is typical in terms of what you would see with this type of development. There are contingencies and hurdles within it that need to be met, and as we lead up to closing. I can tell you that we're currently scheduled to close on the property at the end of the year, and I think I mentioned earlier that we would hope to commence construction in the spring of next year.
Can you talk a little bit about kind of the inclusionary zoning policy at the city of Minneapolis and kind of the process you're going through? I know that there's just a lot of interest in affordability, what that's going to look like in this building. And can you just talk a little bit how you are working with the city to determine that through the options that inclusionary zoning lays out?
Yeah, so there are a handful of different options for inclusionary zoning that kind of, and the inclusionary zoning policy sort of gets triggered when you have over 50 units, as I understand it. And so one of the options is you can just pay a fee to the city and not incorporate any affordable housing into your project. That's not even something we're considering. And that is as a developer who's interested in bringing affordable housing to the neighborhood, I mean that's just a non-starter. We're looking at the affordable options and not looking to pay the fee. So that option one we're not even considering. And then there are three different ways that you can program affordable into your building. One is to program 4% of your units at 30% AMI. The other would be to program 8% of your units at 60% AMI. And the third option is to program 20% of your units at 50% AMI. And that would, with that option, the city of Minneapolis would work with you on what's called tax increment financing, or TIF, meaning that they would help to offset the revenue loss to the developer if you were to choose that kind of more deeper affordable option. That is an option that I have had conversations with the city about. Unfortunately, as it sits right now, that program has not really been, it's not complete. They're still kind of working through a lot of the administrative pieces of it. But what I've been told is that it can be anywhere from a 6 to 8 month process just to determine whether your project fits and whether there will be a TIF award and how much it is. They're still working on compliance. So if you do program your building that way, how do you actually prove to the city on an ongoing basis that complying. So there's just a lot that still needs to be fleshed out with that option, and then I think some of that progress was being made and has kind of taken a little bit of a halt, just as the city has sort of reprioritized its focus over the past few months. So I think to be completely transparent and honest, the 8% is probably the path that we're going to go down with this project. On top of that, though, we've said this, accessibility, affordability has many different definitions. Some people would argue that affordability doesn't, it's not truly affordable unless you're at 30% AMI. From my standpoint, I look at the actual, what is the chunk rent that someone is going to have to pay in this building, and how does that fit with, kind of the metrics that are out there for what an affordable studio is, an affordable 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, and how can we get as close as possible, even in the units that are not designated as affordable, how can we get as close as possible to those chunk rents with these other market rate units? And so that is truly a goal of this project. We will have many units that are very close to hitting those numbers. And Evan did a good job of explaining some of the trade-offs with the building that will help us achieve that. One of them is probably going to result in eliminating the roof deck amenity. That's a very expensive amenity. It's nice for the tenants to have, but ultimately it drives up the cost of rents. And we have a beautiful park across the street that I think is, will provide kind of that same level of outdoor communal space for our residents to enjoy. And we're also studying the 20-year neighborhood park plan, which is coming into shape here, and how that impacts MLK Park, and how we as a building can coalesce with the goals of that plan. So I think that, while we're showing the rooftop deck right now, it is very likely that that's going to be eliminated. And again, that is just going to allow us to create a project that is more affordable. Same with parking. We could find ways to plug in more parking. That's going to make the project much more expensive, maybe not even viable. So these are the trade-offs and the competing kind of interests that you have to look at with projects like this.
Thanks. Looks like we have about 20 minutes left, so I'm going to try to cover some of these bigger kind of categories. And I know you guys hit on this a little bit around kind of construction and the construction timeline. I think the general questions are kind of, how do you mitigate construction noise, construction impacts, considering, the building is being built on a lot that is, there's an apartment building just to the east that's right there, and then, more homes. What is the thought on kind of the construction timeline? Again, maybe reiterate on that, and maybe some plans for kind of like mitigating the impact of construction.
Yeah, I'll take part of this, and then I'll kick it to Evan too. But one thing I just want to mention, just real quickly, back to the roof space. We will program it to be have the functionality of it being a green roof, so to incorporate solar, whether that's at the onset of the project or at some point down the road. That's another consideration that we're taking seriously. With respect to construction and its impact on the neighborhood and specifically on those immediate neighbors, I've already had conversations with the building owner to the immediate south, and we've talked about some different things that we will do that are typical for these types of projects. There's vibration monitoring that we'll hire an engineering firm to, and Evan can do a better job probably of explaining the technicalities of that, but we'll go and do a pre-construction survey of the surrounding buildings and take photographs and video, and so that we can assess any damage that might occur although we will take great measures to make sure that damage does not occur, we are protecting those neighbors in that way. Again, there will be, some disruption, with earth retention or earth movement and things like that, but we have vibration monitors in place that we will calibrate, and it's important not to exceed certain levels of vibration, and so that will be being monitored constantly. So as far as the impact to the surrounding structures, that will be well taken care of. There's also watershed requirements with the building. This is a very buttoned up process that we have professional civil engineers that are looking at the site, and that will have a runoff plan that is top notch. That will actually be an improvement over the current condition, a vast improvement, frankly, which my neighbor to the south is glad to hear. So we'll work with all those immediate neighbors and do our best to mitigate the disruption. And Evan, I don't know if you have anything you'd like to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing that I would add, Alex, is just, from a construction timeline, a building of this size would probably take anywhere from 12 to 13 months to build. I think that activity would probably be, spring it would start winter, spring of 2021. And I think one of the things just to note regarding the, we've talked about the parking and going an additional level underground and kind of where we're at today, this site being that kind of walk out basement to the alley there is actually relatively far less excavation and earthwork than a lot of our sites, and a lot of the noisiest construction work is when people are vibrating sheet piles or drilling caissons, setting H piles and lagging, banging H piles and lagging. Oftentimes you'll hear the big banger going boom, boom, boom. We're actually at a relative advantage here that, keeping it to one level below grade will actually minimize the timeline and the duration of the noisiest part of the construction. Obviously, it's construction site, there will be noise, there will be deliveries, but the city of Minneapolis has policies on when deliveries can happen. So it would basically be consistent with, other sorts of new construction within Minneapolis.
Cool, great, thanks. Kind of a question about transportation, I guess, a little bit, maybe in a two-sided question. One about public transportation, and then two just maybe about traffic. Some concerns about increased traffic in the area. Maybe not, we've covered parking a decent amount, but maybe just kind of thinking about the current traffic load that Curran's has versus this property. How are you seeing that, and maybe mitigating that? And then any impacts or kind of the relationship between this site and public transit. I know obviously it is on the 18 bus line, and I believe that there is a bus stop right out in front of the building, if I'm correct. So yeah, maybe just want to hit on those two items.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Alex, maybe I'll take a crack at this first, and if you have anything to add, jump in. I mean, from a policy perspective, right, I mean, I follow the 2040 planning in Minneapolis, kind of, how they determine and make decisions. And obviously the 2040 plan is public transportation heavy, and they're trying to increase ridership among public transportation. And they are easing restrictions on parking requirements for buildings because, when you go to Chicago and New York, people don't have private cars. We're not there yet. We're not. We certainly aren't. I'm not saying we are. But, from a policy perspective, that's clearly the direction that the Minneapolis City Council and the Planning Commission is heading. Whether we like it or not, there's more bike lanes. There's large light rail projects happening. And quite frankly, statistically, I think that, public transportation ridership probably isn't as high as the city council and the Met Council would like. So I think that, from a city planning commission or a city council perspective, I don't think that there would be a lot of pushback for the lower parking count on a site like this because of the adjacency to public transportation, because there is the thought from kind of a bottom up level that if we build a building with 82 units and only provide 36 parking spaces, then maybe there will only be 36 cars and this building will be full. And then that's going to be another 50 people that are taking public transportation or riding bikes. and utilizing the services that the city and the Metropolitan Council are providing. So, you know, I don't see any negative to the public transportation. I think that, you know, having a building that would, you know, potentially position people to rely more upon that is a good thing from the city's perspective. And I think that, you know, if you go the other side of the equation, you know, if everybody moved in here had 2 cars, yeah, there would be a parking shortage, you know, but the sizes of the units don't really support double occupancy, double person occupancy. And, you know, quite frankly, I think that this site, you know, with the adjacency to the park and some lower density uses, actually does have more available street parking than other sites. I'm not saying that there's an abundance of it or that there's not an issue at times, but I'm saying that we do a lot of urban infill projects, and oftentimes urban infill projects are saddled between 2 big apartment buildings and there's not a single street parking available, and it's all metered. And this one just, you know, is a little bit different condition than that. So I think that if that addresses your question, Alex, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think you hit all the major points. I mean, we really want to encourage mass transit, bus ridership. It's a important goal of the cities, and we support it. And my hope is that we're delivering a project here that will attract folks who don't have cars, don't want to have cars, who want to take mass transit, who want to ride their bikes. I think we're in a perfect location for that. So, yeah, this project is very much in line with that goal.
Could you talk maybe even a little bit on this topic, is who you see? There's been a couple questions, and I guess take this how you would like. Who do you see this project? Who is this project marketing to? Who do you see living here? And I maybe if you could break that out via kind of like the different unit sizes. Like, and there's been kind of a few comments about, you know, is there any research or background to say that like there is a demand for this type of project and these type of units within, I think maybe specifically within our area, whether that's our neighborhood or southwest Minneapolis.
So first and foremost, one of the wonderful things about Kingfield is the diversity of the neighborhood, and you know, our first, I guess, target in terms of who we're marketing towards is folks in Kingfield who, you know, folks that want to live in Kingfield, that fit that diverse mix of demographic, cultural, social, professional, all of it. So, you know, it's, again, we're trying to create a product that we can market to as broad a base of people as possible, and that's the primary goal. Can people hear me okay?
Maybe if you can move a little closer. I think there's like I think you have like an air conditioner or something in the background.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So that was the kind of the who we're targeting question, and now I'm trying to remember the other piece of the question.
I think, yeah, like who it's targeted to, and I think the other, if there is like, I don't need to say a market research or supporting information that says to you, right, like there is a demand for this type of housing, these size of units within our, maybe this neighborhood or this area.
Yeah, we study, I mean, there's both formal research and then just anecdotal. You know, I would say the first place to look is to the city's 2040 plan. And they spent years and years, as everyone knows, studying and discussing what the city needs in terms of housing. And this is what ultimately got proposed and passed. So we know that there is a need for housing in the city of Minneapolis. From a market study standpoint, smaller units mean cheaper units, more affordable units, and you know, you tend to see those types of units, the studios and the one bedrooms, rent quickest, and I think that's both a function of, you know, single people, you know, like to live alone, or or couples who get more and more people are getting more and more used to living in smaller spaces and enjoying, especially in these urban settings, enjoying the spaces surrounding the buildings that they live in. And that's why we try to program some community space within the building, but we also look for opportunities to build in great neighborhoods that have great restaurants and retail that we can support, and that are attractive to bringing residents to the building. So you tend to see, again, a mix of desirable units. We want to program in units that can accommodate larger groups of people, families. So that's why there's we've added 2 and 3 bedroom units as well. So I think we have a nice range, and again, there's been formal and informal study that's gone into like how we think we should best program this from a unit mix standpoint.
Kind of maybe switching topics a little bit, can you, and I'm going to we've got about 7 minutes left, so I think this question and then maybe one more or a couple more. Can you talk a little bit about maintenance and who, if I'm sure you personally maybe won't be maintaining the building, but if you have a maintenance company that you typically work with, and there was a few comments specifically around on the 42nd Street side and that kind of the hill there, and thinking about snow and ice maintenance, and maybe I'm guessing you haven't thought maybe specifically about how you're going to handle that yet, but I think the question broadly is, will you have a maintenance company, and how does that typically work in your projects?
Yeah, so this building will be professionally property managed, and we've already actually selected who that property manager will be, and just kind of as a general note, my process as a developer, it's very important for me to have the team fully assembled as early in the project as possible, because that creates efficiencies and alignment of goals and strategies. And I'll say it again, efficiency is a very important part of this project, because that's how you deliver the best product at the best price, and then again that just transfers into the affordability equation. So we'll have a professionally property managed building that will also likely be an investor in the building, and that's important too, because then they have that additional incentive to take great care of a building that they are also owners of. So
great. Yep, nope, that's perfect. And then I guess maybe I'll do one kind of final question. And I know you've both been hitting on this kind of broadly and in all the questions. And I think this is a question that we've asked other developers, and then even some from the chat, and some other questions have asked is what does this project contribute to Kingfield? What does it contribute to the residents? What does it contribute to the businesses? How is this project a value add to the neighborhood? And how do you see it fitting into kind of the fabric, and what value does that have? Both, I would say, maybe in the short term and in the long term.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Alex, maybe I'll just talk architecturally real quick. I mean, first of all, Tucci Montgomery Architects works in a lot of redevelopment scenarios. We do a lot of urban infill projects downtown, a lot in Minneapolis. And, I mean, this is a great site. It's underutilized. Everybody loves Curran's. I lived in Uptown. I was, I've been a Minneapolis resident for 8 years, lived all over downtown Minneapolis. And, while it's sad to see the restaurant go, it is not being utilized to its highest and best potential. And I think that, from a redevelopment standpoint, I mean, having 84 individuals or families or a mix thereof, coming to the neighborhood and adding character and adding diversity, and leveraging this site that is a beautiful site. I mean, you have basically an unobstructed 2-block park to the north that won't be redeveloped. You're going to capture all of those views. We are, I think in these slides that I presented as a part of the presentation, I think hands down, that's one of the reasons that we wanted to kind of show the side by sides. I think just from a pedestrian improvement and a pedestrian experience perspective, we feel like the building that we have proposed today is going to create an immediate and positive impact to the streetscape, the aesthetic and the character of the neighborhood fabric. There's going to be much more greenery. There's going to be more people. There's going to be active uses directly on the street. We're not going to have the surface parking lot at such a prominent corner. We're getting rid of the retaining wall on both sides, including that large wall along 42nd. And again, I think Alex hit on the fact that, Minneapolis is a growing city and we have an extreme housing shortage, and all neighborhoods, the most sustainable housing is dense housing. Single family houses are not sustainable. Redevelopment into multifamily and high density lots is a sustainable means for addressing our housing shortage and bringing more people to a neighborhood so that they can enjoy the fabric that all of the residents are so passionate about in this neighborhood. So architecturally and kind of policy standpoint, that's kind of what I would say the immediate value is. We're greening up the street. We're allowing more people to live here. Obviously from a Minneapolis perspective, we're increasing a tax basis, revenue tax basis, putting more money into the economy and into our local city. And we're taking advantage of an underutilized site that, hopefully will be a vast improvement for many, many years. So with that, Alex, if you have any additional, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure, yeah, just to kind of dovetail on that and my prior comments about, that bringing in a professional property management team. I am in the neighborhood, and I'm going to continue to be there. This is a project as someone who has been in the neighborhood for years and years. It's very important to me to make sure that it's something to be proud of, not just me, but for the neighborhood. So it's not like, I'm not some developer who's just coming in trying to plug a building in and it's going to piece out. Like I'm firmly rooted in the neighborhood. I think I understand the neighborhood well, demographic, the diversity, the things that make the neighborhood great, and really the goal here again is to try to create more options for the people. We're not trying to change the neighborhood. We're not trying to push people out. We're trying to lift it up. So that's what I'll say.
Great. Okay. Well, we're at 8 o'clock right now. I think that was the majority of kind of, if I didn't get to your question, I really apologize, or didn't ask something very specific that you wanted to ask. I apologize. But I guess I don't want to say this to Alex and Evan, but maybe I think we at KFNA would be more than willing to take additional questions and then pass those on to the team, or answer any questions that people have for us about the specific project. And also know that there will be additional opportunities to have your voice heard on this project, whether that is, like I just mentioned, engaging with us consistently, or engaging with the city at the city level as this project works through the city process. So KFNA and the Redevelopment Committee will continue to let neighbors know and inform you, as we always do, about the project as it moves through that, and ways to engage further. So also know that we are going to be, there's been a large chat going on with some kind of feedback that weren't maybe totally questions, but maybe were good feedback specifically. We save those chats and we will pass those on to Alex and Evan and the team as well. So again, feel free to reach out to me, Sarah as well, if you have any specific questions or any other comments. And we will, like I said, keep you informed. So thank you both for the presentation and the information. And if I'll just give one last plug for Redevelopment, because I know it's been plugged a couple times in the chat, but if you're interested in joining, if you're interested in kind of informing these projects, even maybe before they happen, and kind of setting some guidelines in our neighborhood and some goals, please reach out to us and join the Redevelopment Committee, because we would love to have you, and we'd love to continue to make Kingfield a great place to live. So again, thank you, everybody. We will be signing off here in a couple seconds. So thanks again. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Sarah.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.